Judge Robert Willis smirked at the man in the leather jacket. Hollywood legend? Begging over a guest house? The courtroom chuckled. Hollywood legend stared back, silent. Then, slam. A silver badge hit the table. United States Secret Service. Serial number 0471. The judge froze. He'd seen that number before. On a corpse. What is this? He whispered. Hollywood legend leaned in. Your death warrant. That guest house? It's yours. The judge's hands shook. He'd been paid to demolish it. Clear the room, he barked. But Hollywood legend didn't move. Too late. They're here. Outside, tires screeched. The silence that followed was suffocating. The casual amusement that had filled the Wyoming courtroom a moment ago had vanished like smoke in the wind. Judge Robert Willis stared at the silver badge on the table, his fingers hovering over it, hesitant, as if touching it might confirm his worst fear. The lettering on the surface gleamed under the overhead lights, crisp and unmistakable. United States Secret Service. A ripple of hushed whispers spread through the room. The locals who had been chuckling now exchanged uneasy glances. The bailiff took a half step forward, his hand unconsciously drifting toward his holster. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. He forced out a short, incredulous laugh. Is this a joke? His voice was lighter than he intended. Are we supposed to believe this is real? Hollywood legend leaned back in his chair, his pale blue eyes locked onto the judge with an unreadable expression. His voice, deep and weathered, cut through the tension like a blade. I don't joke about things like this, Your Honor. Willis hesitated, glancing at the bailiff before picking up the badge. It was heavier than he expected. This wasn't some cheap prop from a film set. It had weight, authority. The laughter in the room had completely died. The judge turned the badge over in his hands, examining the fine details. It wasn't standard issue. The insignia was unique. The number etched into the metal. This wasn't something handed out to just anyone. Willis looked up, his confidence rattled. Where did you get this? Hollywood legend didn't answer right away. He let the silence stretch, the pressure building. Then, in a tone colder than the Wyoming winter, he said, Earned it. The judge swallowed. This was supposed to be a routine zoning case, a simple matter of county laws. He had been prepared to dismiss it outright, to make an example of Hollywood legend, to remind a Hollywood legend that fame didn't mean a damn thing in a court of law. But now, this was something else entirely. You expect me to believe you're... What? Some kind of federal agent? A few gasps came from the gallery. Hollywood legend smirked, but there was no humor in it. Not anymore. The judge's grip on the badge tightened. He could feel his pulse in his fingertips. This doesn't change the law, Willis said, struggling to maintain control of the room. You still violated zoning regulations. Secret Service or not, that guest house on your property exceeds the limits set by Jackson County. Hollywood legend sighed, shifting in his seat. That guest house, he said, isn't just a guest house. Willis narrowed his eyes. Then what is it? Hollywood legend didn't answer. Instead, he turned slightly, glancing toward the back of the courtroom where a man had just entered. The tension doubled in an instant. The newcomer was tall, sharp-eyed, and dressed in a dark suit. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to being in control. The badge in his hand flashed under the lights as he stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Judge Willis stiffened. Who the hell are you? The man ignored him, locking eyes with Hollywood legend instead. Been a long time, Hollywood legend, he said. Hollywood legend exhaled slowly. Not long enough, Helton. The name sent a new chill through the air. Mark Helton, a federal agent. Helton turned his attention to the judge. Your Honor, we need to speak. Privately. Willis looked between the two men, suspicion growing in his gut. This is my courtroom, he snapped, and this case is still under my authority. Helton took a step closer. Not anymore, he said. This just became a matter of national security. The judge's stomach turned. The murmurs in the courtroom had turned into outright confusion. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Hollywood legend and Helton. Willis clenched his jaw. I don't like being strong-armed in my own court, Agent Helton. You're going to have to do better than that. Helton held his gaze. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into his suit jacket and tossed a file onto the judge's bench. The folder landed with a quiet thud. Willis hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he flipped it open. The first image made his breath catch. A grainy black and white photo of Hollywood legend, standing next to military officials, a former president, and men whose faces were blurred. Another photo, a surveillance shot. Hollywood legend in a foreign country, speaking to someone whose face had been blacked out. Willis's hands felt cold. He turned the page. More images. More classified records. Reports. Missions. None of this should exist. This, the judge whispered, this can't be real. Helton's voice was quiet. It's real, Your Honor. And if you don't want to get caught in the crossfire, you'll listen carefully. The judge looked back at Hollywood legend. The man hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. You were never just an actor, were you? Willis asked. Hollywood legend's smirk returned, but this time there was something almost dangerous behind it. You're catching on. Willis sat back, mind spinning. He had walked into his courtroom today expecting a simple case. Instead, he had just opened a door he might never be able to close. Clear the courtroom, the judge ordered. A moment of hesitation, then the bailiff began ushering people out. Helton nodded approvingly. Now we can talk. The doors shut. The room was empty. The silence that followed was even heavier than before. The thick silence inside the empty courtroom was suffocating. The sound of the heavy doors locking behind the last spectator echoed like a gunshot. Judge Willis sat stiffly in his chair, his hands gripping the arms of his bench a little too tightly. Across from him, Hollywood legend remained unmoving, calm as ever. The silver badge still rested on the table between them. But now, it felt like something far heavier, something that could crush the entire courtroom under its weight. Mark Helton leaned forward, resting both hands on the judge's desk. You don't understand what you just stepped into, Your Honor. And if you want to keep breathing, you're going to listen carefully. Willis forced himself to sit up straighter, masking the growing unease creeping up his spine. That sounds an awful lot like a threat. Helton didn't blink. No, Judge. A warning. He tapped the file he had just handed over. The papers inside were stamped with government seals, classified markings, and redacted lines of text. You think this is just about zoning laws? Helton asked. You have no idea what's really happening. The judge exhaled sharply, flipping through the documents again. The deeper he went, the worse it got. Military reports, surveillance records, secret missions spanning decades, Hollywood legend's name appearing in places it had no business being. Willis's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Explain. Now. Helton's jaw tightened. Blackthorn. The judge frowned. What? Hollywood legend let out a small chuckle, finally speaking. Go ahead, Helton. Tell him what happens when ghosts refuse to stay buried. Helton's expression darkened. He straightened, glancing toward the locked doors before speaking. Blackthorn was an off-the-books government program. It existed outside of laws, outside of oversight. Agents were recruited, trained, and deployed for covert operations the U.S. would never officially acknowledge. Willis's stomach turned. You're saying it was an assassination unit? Helton nodded. Among other things. The judge turned back to Hollywood legend. And you were part of this? Hollywood legend met his gaze without flinching. We did things no one else could. Went places no one else could. Took out threats before they became threats. Willis shook his head. That's insane. If this was real, people would know about it. Helton gave a humorless smirk. You think the government doesn't know how to erase its own past? The judge looked at the papers again. His hands were sweating. He wanted to deny it, wanted to believe this was all a joke, but the evidence was right in front of him. Hollywood legend leaned forward. Problem is, some things don't stay buried. Willis swallowed hard. What are you saying? Helton sighed, rubbing his temple. Blackthorn was shut down years ago, but now, someone's trying to bring it back. The words sent a chill down the judge's spine. And let me guess, Willis said, his voice quieter now, that someone is hunting down the people who were part of it. Hollywood legend nodded once. The courtroom was no longer a place of law. It was a battlefield. Willis felt lightheaded. He exhaled, gripping the desk to steady himself. So what? This zoning case is just a coincidence? Helton and Hollywood Legend exchanged a look. Helton shook his head. No, Judge. This was a test. Willis's heart pounded. A test? Hollywood Legend's eyes narrowed. They wanted to see how I'd react. Willis looked back down at the badge on the table. And now? Hollywood Legend's voice was calm. Now they know I'm still a problem. A hard knock sounded at the side door. Willis flinched. The bailiff peeked in, his face pale. Judge, sir, there's a man here. Says he's federal. Urgent matter. Helton's posture stiffened. He turned to Hollywood Legend. You expecting company? Hollywood Legend's expression darkened. No. The judge felt his pulse hammering in his throat. Let him in. The door swung open and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit stepped inside. His presence sucked the air out of the room. The judge, still reeling from everything he had learned, forced himself to speak. And you are? The man reached into his jacket, pulled out a badge, and held it up. Special Agent Marcus Voss, he said smoothly. Homeland Security. Willis shot a look at Helton, who was stone-faced. Voss stepped closer, his eyes locked onto Hollywood Legend. Mr. Hollywood Legend, you and I need to have a conversation. Hollywood Legend tilted his head slightly. Do we? Voss gave a small smirk. Yes, because as of this morning, you're officially a national security threat. Willis's stomach dropped. Helton took a step forward. Voss, what the hell are you talking about? Voss pulled out a thick sealed folder and tossed it onto the judge's desk. Classified directive, signed this morning. Hollywood Legend is to be taken into custody, immediately. Willis's throat went dry. He didn't move, didn't speak. Hollywood Legend, however, didn't look surprised. He exhaled slowly, then let out a dry chuckle. Well, guess I made the list. Voss didn't flinch. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Mr. Hollywood Legend. Hollywood Legend's eyes flicked to Helton. I'm guessing there's no easy way, is there? Helton's jaw clenched. No. Willis finally found his voice. Hold on. I'm the judge in this room and... Voss cut him off. Not anymore, Your Honor. The judge's blood turned cold. Hollywood Legend sighed, shaking his head. I really hate it when people barge into my business. Voss reached for his cuffs, and that's when Hollywood Legend moved. Fast. Before anyone could react, Hollywood Legend slammed his chair backward, flipping the desk over in one swift motion. The judge barely had time to duck before gunfire erupted. Helton drew his weapon. Voss's men shouted orders. Hollywood Legend was already gone, moving like a ghost. Gunfire erupted, shattering the illusion of control in the courtroom. Judge Willis barely had time to duck behind his desk before the first round of bullets ripped through the air. Screams from the hall faded into silence. Papers flew, chairs toppled. The polished wood of the judge's bench splintered under the assault. Hollywood Legend was gone. One moment he had been sitting there, calm as ever. The next, he had vanished like smoke. Mark Helton dove behind a row of chairs, his gun already drawn. Across the room, Voss and his agents fanned out, barking orders, scanning for movement. Where the hell did he go? One of them snarled, pressing his back against the wall. Voss gritted his teeth. Stay sharp. He's not running. He's repositioning. Willis could barely breathe. He pressed himself flat against the floor, his heart hammering against his ribs. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was a damn zoning case. Now his courtroom was a war zone. Helton glanced over at him, expression tight with frustration. Judge, stay down. Like he had any other choice. From somewhere near the back of the room, a single gunshot rang out, a sharp cry of pain. One of Voss's men dropped to his knees, clutching his arm. Damn it, Voss hissed, eyes scanning the darkened corners of the courtroom. Then, movement. Hollywood Legend emerged from the shadows, swift and precise. He wasn't running. He was hunting. Willis saw the hard, predatory look in his eyes, and for the first time, he realized just how dangerous this man really was. 2 more shots. Clean. Controlled. Another agent fell. Voss barely had time to react before Hollywood Legend ducked low, weaving past the desk like a ghost. A second later, he was at the side exit. Gone. Voss cursed loudly. Stand down! He's too damn fast. Helton stood slowly, lowering his gun. His jaw was tight, his posture stiff. The tension lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Willis forced himself to sit up, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of his bench. Somebody explain what the hell just happened. Voss shot him a glare. You want the short version? You've just been caught in a fight you don't understand. Willis's stomach turned. Helton stepped forward, eyes locked on Voss. This was a setup. Voss didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulled out a thick, sealed folder, and tossed it onto the judge's desk. Recognize this? Willis hesitated, then slowly opened the folder. What he saw stole the breath from his lungs. A photo. Black and white. Surveillance quality. Hollywood legend. Standing outside what looked like a burned-out compound, and behind him, bodies. The judge's throat went dry. He turned the page. Another photo. This time from a satellite feed. Hollywood legend was standing near a private airfield, speaking to a man whose face was blurred out. More photos, more evidence, each one tighter around his throat. Voss crossed his arms. You still think he's just some retired actor fighting over a guest house? Willis struggled to speak. This was taken recently. 2 weeks ago, Voss confirmed. Helton cursed under his breath. If he's been active this recently, then that means... Yeah, Voss cut in. It means Hollywood legend's been a marked man for a while, and it means we're already behind. The weight of it crashed down on Willis. He had thought this was about county regulations. Now, he was looking at something far bigger. Helton narrowed his eyes. If Hollywood legend was in Eastern Europe 2 weeks ago, that means someone's been tracking him this entire time. Voss gave a humorless smile. Exactly. The judge swallowed hard. Who? Helton and Voss exchanged a look. Then Voss said a name that made the air feel 10 degrees colder. Logan Pierce. The name hung in the air like a curse. Willis's gut twisted. He didn't know the name, but he saw the way Helton stiffened, the way Voss's smirk disappeared. The judge turned to Helton. Who is he? Helton ran a hand down his face. A ghost, a former Blackthorn operative who never got the memo that the war ended. When the program shut down, most of its people disappeared. Some retired, some vanished. But Pierce, he saw an opportunity. Voss nodded. And now he's tying up loose ends. Willis's blood turned to ice. You're saying he's killing off former Blackthorn agents? Voss tilted his head. You're catching on. The judge's stomach flipped. He took a shaky breath. And Hollywood legend is on that list? Helton's expression darkened. He's at the top of it. Willis felt the room close in around him. This wasn't just a zoning case. This was an execution waiting to happen. Then, a distant explosion. The entire courthouse shook. Willis's eyes widened. What the... Helton moved first, bolting toward the window. Outside, a plume of thick black smoke rose into the sky. Voss's jaw clenched. Son of a bitch! Willis's stomach dropped. What is that? Helton's voice was cold as steel. Pierce just made his move. A buzzing noise filled the air. Voss pulled out his phone, checked the screen, then cursed. He looked up at the judge. Looks like your courthouse isn't going to be standing much longer, Your Honor. Willis froze. His mouth was dry. What the hell does that mean? Voss exhaled slowly. It means you just made the list, too. The judge's heart stopped. His old life was over. A second explosion rocked the building. Voss grabbed the judge by the arm. Move, Judge, unless you want to be buried under the rubble. Helton spun, already moving. The walls cracked, the lights flickered, and as they rushed toward the exit, Judge Willis realized the truth. This wasn't just Hollywood legend's fight anymore. It was his, too. The courthouse shook violently as another explosion rocked the foundation. The sound was deafening, a deep, earth-shaking roar that sent cracks racing up the walls. Judge Willis stumbled, nearly falling, but Voss yanked him forward, shoving him toward the exit. Move, Judge, Voss barked. We don't have time. Helton was ahead of them, his gun drawn, his eyes darting toward the smoke rising just outside the building. They burst through the main doors, emerging into pure chaos. Black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the courthouse. Their dark-tinted windows reflected the flames licking up the side of the building. Armed men poured out, moving in tight formation. Voss's grip on Willis's arm tightened. "Stay close." The judge barely had time to nod before gunfire erupted. Helton was already moving, returning fire with deadly precision. His first shot took out the lead gunman. The second hit another square in the chest, but there were too many of them. "Hollywood legend!" Helton yelled over the chaos. "Where the hell are you?" Then, as if on cue, a single shot rang out from the courthouse roof. One of the gunmen dropped instantly. Then another. Then another. Willis's stomach twisted. He looked up, just in time to see Hollywood legend standing at the edge of the rooftop, rifle in hand, expression cold. "About damn time," Voss muttered, shoving Willis toward a nearby police vehicle for cover. Hollywood legend fired again. Another attacker fell. The remaining gunmen scrambled, diving for cover. Helton took the opening and moved. He grabbed Willis's shoulder. "We're getting out of here. Now!" The judge barely had time to process what was happening. He was breathing too fast. His hands were shaking. His world had flipped completely upside down. Gunfire, explosions, secret operatives. And now he was a target. This morning he had been debating zoning laws. Now he was running for his life. Voss was already at the police vehicle, pulling open the door. "We need to move, before they—" Tires screeched. A third black SUV whipped around the corner at high speed. Voss barely had time to react before it slammed into him, sending him rolling across the pavement. Willis gasped. "Voss!" Voss hit the ground hard, groaning in pain. The SUV's doors flew open. More gunmen spilled out. Hollywood legend cursed under his breath. He shifted, adjusting his aim. But before he could fire, something changed. A man stepped out of the SUV. Tall, dark suit, cold eyes. Even from a distance, the power in his presence was undeniable. Willis's stomach dropped. Helton froze beside him. "Logan Pierce," Helton muttered. Willis's breath caught, the name that had sent chills down his spine. The man who was hunting Hollywood legend. And now, he was standing right in front of them. Pierce didn't speak immediately. He surveyed the scene calmly. He barely even glanced at the bodies on the ground. Instead, he focused on one thing: Hollywood legend. Still perched on the rooftop, rifle aimed right at his head. Pierce smiled. Hollywood legend. His voice was too casual, too controlled. Hollywood legend didn't lower the rifle. "Pierce." Pierce took a slow step forward, hands in his pockets. "Still playing the hero." Hollywood legend's finger tightened on the trigger. "Still killing the people who trusted you?" Pierce sighed, tilting his head slightly. "You always were sentimental." Helton gritted his teeth. "We need to get out of here. Now." But before anyone could move, Pierce raised a hand, and the remaining gunmen raised their weapons instantly. He smiled. "How about we make a deal?" Hollywood legend didn't move, didn't blink. "I don't make deals with dead men." Pierce's smirk widened. "You should, because if you don't, well, let's just say the judge here is going to have a very short retirement." Willis's blood turned ice cold. Pierce's eyes shifted to him. "And I do mean short," he added. The judge felt like he couldn't breathe. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was leverage. Helton shifted beside him, whispering, "Judge, whatever happens, do not move." Pierce stepped forward. "Hollywood legend, we both know how this ends. You're outnumbered, outgunned. The government already considers you a problem. So why not save yourself the trouble and come with me?" Hollywood legend chuckled. "And let you put a bullet in my head the second I turn my back?" "No, thanks." Pierce sighed. "I thought you might say that." Then, without warning, he lifted his hand. "Kill them." Gunfire erupted. Willis hit the ground as bullets ripped through the police car. Glass shattered. Metal screamed. Helton grabbed him, shoving him behind cover. "Stay down!" Hollywood legend moved fast. He fired from the rooftop, taking out the first attacker, before rolling away as bullets peppered the roof. Voss, still bleeding from his fall, dragged himself behind another vehicle. He pulled his gun, firing wildly. But they were surrounded. Helton swore under his breath. "We're not making it out of this." Willis felt pure terror clawing up his throat. This was it. Then, an engine roared to life. Willis whipped his head around. A black pickup truck came barreling down the street at full speed. At the wheel, Joseph Tanner, the former Blackthorn operative they had been looking for. "Get in!" Tanner shouted, slamming the truck into one of the SUVs, sending metal and glass flying. Hollywood legend didn't hesitate. He leaped from the rooftop, landing hard in the truck bed. Voss, bleeding, barely able to stand, stumbled toward the vehicle. Helton grabbed the judge and shoved him forward. "Move!" Willis didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted, adrenaline surging through his veins. Bullets slammed into the pavement beside him. Pierce's voice cut through the chaos. "Don't let them escape!" Willis reached the truck just as Helton yanked open the door and shoved him inside. Tanner floored the gas. The tires screeched. The truck shot forward, racing away from the gunfire. From Logan Pierce. From the courthouse. From everything Willis had once believed was safe. As they sped away, Hollywood legend turned to look back. Pierce stood in the wreckage, watching them disappear, hands still in his pockets. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. And that, more than anything, terrified Willis to his core. Because Pierce wasn't just chasing them. He was enjoying the hunt. The truck roared down the highway, its tires screaming against the pavement. The air inside was thick with adrenaline, the smell of gunpowder still clinging to their clothes. Judge Willis was breathing hard, his hands gripping the seat so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had barely made it out alive. The courthouse, the very place where law and order had once been his shield, was now nothing more than a smoking ruin. He turned to Hollywood legend, who sat in the truck bed, reloading a magazine with the practiced ease of a man who had done it 1,000 times before. "This is insane," Willis finally muttered, his voice hoarse. Tanner, still gripping the wheel, snorted. "Welcome to the real world, Judge." Helton in the front seat was checking his wounds. He had taken a grazing shot to the arm, blood soaking his sleeve, but he barely seemed to notice. Willis exhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. His whole life had changed in an instant. "What the hell just happened back there?" he demanded. Tanner didn't take his eyes off the road. "Simple. We just pissed off the most dangerous man in the world." Willis swallowed hard. "Logan Pierce." Tanner nodded. Judge turned to Hollywood legend. "You knew he'd come." Hollywood legend didn't answer right away. He finished reloading, then finally met Willis's gaze. "I knew he'd be watching," Hollywood legend said. "Didn't think he'd be that bold." Helton scoffed. "That wasn't bold. That was a damn message." Willis frowned. "What kind of message?" Tanner glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "The kind that says we're all dead men walking." The words sent a chill down Willis's spine. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of the truck's engine filled the silence. Then Willis exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Where the hell are we even going?" Hollywood legend leaned forward. "Utah, Salt Lake City." Willis blinked. "Why Utah?" Tanner grinned. "Because that's where the only guy left who might have answers is hiding." The judge's stomach twisted. "And who exactly is that?" Tanner's grin faded. "Joseph Tanner." Willis frowned. "But you're Joseph Tanner." Tanner chuckled. "Yeah, and I'm talking about the only other guy who knows Blackthorn better than I do." Hollywood legend's voice was steady. "Victor Langley." The name landed like a hammer. Helton cursed under his breath. "Langley's still alive?" Hollywood legend nodded. If he wasn't, Pierce wouldn't be trying so hard to find him. Willis had never heard the name before, but the way the others reacted made his stomach tighten. "Who the hell is Langley?" Tanner kept his eyes on the road. "He was our handler, the one who made sure Blackthorn ran smoothly. If Pierce is trying to restart it, Langley's the only one who knows how it all fits together." The judge's skin crawled. This was a government program that wasn't supposed to exist. A secret buried so deep that not even the highest levels of power acknowledged it. And now he was sitting in a stolen truck, on the run, chasing the only man who might have the truth. Helton wiped a hand down his face. "This is a suicide mission." Tanner grinned. "Yeah, ain't it fun?" Willis wasn't sure if he wanted to throw up or jump out of the truck. Then, headlights appeared in the distance. Hollywood legend stiffened. Tanner's fingers tightened on the wheel. We got company. Willis turned, looking through the back window. A black SUV was gaining on them. Fast. Helton muttered a curse. They're not letting us go that easy. Tanner pressed the gas. The truck lurched forward, but the SUV matched their speed. Hollywood Legend raised his rifle. Before he could fire, the SUV's windows rolled down, and gunfire ripped through the night. The first shot took out the side mirror. The second punched through the back window, missing Willis's head by inches. "Jesus!" the judge yelled, ducking low. Hollywood Legend returned fire. His first shot hit the windshield of the SUV, spiderwebbing the glass. But the driver didn't slow down. Tanner yanked the wheel. The truck veered onto a dirt road, kicking up dust. The SUV followed. "They're not giving up," Helton muttered. Willis felt pure terror in his veins. "What do we do?" Tanner grinned. "We fight." The SUV swerved, trying to cut them off. Hollywood Legend took another shot. The driver's side tire exploded. The SUV jerked violently to the side, but the driver kept control. "Persistent bastards," Tanner muttered. Helton leaned out the window, firing 3 quick shots. One of the gunmen slumped over, blood spraying across the inside of the car. The SUV swerved again, but still didn't stop. Then, another vehicle appeared behind it. Willis's blood turned ice cold. "There's more!" he shouted. Another black SUV, gaining fast. Tanner growled. "Screw this!" He yanked the wheel. The truck suddenly skidded sideways, spinning in a half circle. The first SUV tried to adjust, but it was too late. Tanner gunned the gas, slamming the truck into the side of the SUV. Metal screamed. SUV flipped, rolling violently into the dirt. The second SUV barely avoided the wreck, veering off course. For a second, everything was chaos. Then, silence. Only the rumble of the truck's engine remained. Willis was shaking. He looked at Hollywood Legend, whose expression hadn't changed. Tanner exhaled. "That should buy us some time." Helton checked his ammo. "Not enough." Hollywood Legend nodded. "They'll be back." Willis ran a trembling hand through his hair. "So what now?" Hollywood Legend didn't hesitate. "Now we find Langley." The truck roared back onto the road, disappearing into the night. Logan Pierce wouldn't stop hunting them, but they weren't running anymore. They were fighting back. The truck thundered down the lonely stretch of highway, disappearing into the black void of the desert night. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of a loose bullet casing rolling across the floorboard. Judge Willis sat in the passenger seat, his pulse still pounding from the firefight. His world had shattered in a single night. Hours ago, he had been sitting in a courtroom, debating zoning laws. Now, he was a fugitive. And the worst part? He didn't even know why. Willis exhaled, rubbing his face. "Tell me something, Hollywood Legend. Why the hell does a Hollywood actor have the entire weight of a secret kill squad hunting him down?" Hollywood Legend, still sitting in the truck bed, barely reacted. He was cleaning his rifle, methodically loading each bullet with the kind of careful precision that came with years of experience. Finally, he spoke. He was dressed simply, flannel shirt, jeans, nothing flashy. He didn't even look surprised to see them. Instead, he sighed and took a sip of his coffee. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Hollywood Legend slid into the booth across from him. Tanner took the seat next to him. Willis and Helton hesitated, then followed. Langley set his coffee down and exhaled. "You always were too stubborn to stay dead, Hollywood Legend." Hollywood Legend smirked. "I could say the same about you." Langley chuckled. "Guess we're both ghosts now." Tanner leaned forward. "We need answers, Langley. Pierce is making moves. He's hunting us." Langley's expression darkened. He glanced toward the waitress, then back at them. "Not here," he muttered. Hollywood Legend narrowed his eyes. "Then where?" Langley stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "Follow me." The 4 of them exchanged looks. Then, one by one, they followed Langley out of the diner. The judge felt it in his gut. They were about to learn the truth, and something told him it was worse than they could imagine. The night air outside the diner was cold and still. The neon sign above the entrance flickered weakly, buzzing against the quiet desert wind. Victor Langley walked ahead of them, moving with the careful precision of a man who had spent his entire life looking over his shoulder. Judge Willis followed close behind, his nerves frayed. He still wasn't sure if Langley was a friend or just another ghost in this never-ending nightmare. Hollywood legend and Tanner didn't say a word. Helton, still nursing his injured arm, muttered, "This better be worth it." Langley led them down a dirt path behind the diner. There, tucked against the edge of town, sat a small, run-down trailer. He pulled open the door, motioning them inside. "Come in, quickly." Willis hesitated. "You sure we're safe here?" Langley smirked. "No such thing as safe anymore, Judge. But this is as close as you'll get." They stepped inside. The trailer wasn't much to look at. Small, cramped, but it was clean, organized. Maps were tacked to the walls. Stacks of old files and classified documents were piled across a desk. A single rifle leaned against the far corner. Langley sat down heavily in a chair, rubbing his temples. "You want answers? Fine. You're about to get them." Tanner crossed his arms. "Start talking, old man. Pierce is hunting us, and I want to know why." Langley sighed. He glanced at Hollywood legend, then finally spoke. Blackthorn was never really shut down. Willis's stomach dropped. Helton froze. "What did you just say?" Langley exhaled slowly. "They buried the files, erased the names, made it look like we never existed. But you don't just kill a program like Blackthorn. You just put it on ice." Hollywood legend's jaw tightened. "Who brought it back?" Langley looked him dead in the eyes. "Pierce." The word hung in the air like a loaded gun. Willis felt his pulse quicken. "You're telling me Logan Pierce is trying to restart Blackthorn?" Langley nodded. "Not just restart it, Judge. Rebuild it." Willis shook his head. "But why? If Blackthorn was so dangerous, why bring it back?" Langley's expression darkened. "Because someone is paying him too." The room went silent. Hollywood legend leaned forward. "Who?" Langley hesitated, then muttered a name that sent a chill down Willis's spine. "Victor Langley." Willis blinked. "Wait, what?" Langley smirked. "That's the name on the contract. My name." Hollywood legend's expression didn't change. "You're saying someone put a hit out on you?" Langley nodded. "That's why I've been in hiding. Pierce isn't just tying up loose ends. He's making sure I don't get in his way." Helton ran a hand through his hair. "Jesus Christ." Tanner leaned against the wall. "So let me get this straight. You're saying Pierce is being paid to wipe out the last remnants of Blackthorn so he can start fresh?" Langley exhaled. "That's exactly what I'm saying." The judge felt sick. Hollywood legend's voice was quiet. "And the people funding him?" Langley's eyes darkened. "That's the real problem." He gestured to the files stacked on the desk. "I've been tracking encrypted messages, movement of money, the kind of offshore transactions that don't leave a paper trail." Helton stepped forward, scanning the documents. "And?" Langley's voice dropped. "These aren't just government contracts. They're private, corporate." The room went dead silent. Willis felt his mouth go dry. "You're saying a corporation is behind this?" Langley nodded. "Not just any corporation, multiple. Defense contractors, energy firms, billionaires, people with power. The kind who don't answer to anyone." Tanner whistled. "That's bad." Langley chuckled darkly. "It's worse than bad. It means Blackthorn isn't coming back as a government program. It's coming back as a business." Willis could hardly breathe. A private kill squad. Helton clenched his fists. "Pierce is building an army." Langley nodded. "And we're the only ones who know." Tanner exhaled sharply. "So what's the plan, old man? Because right now we're all on the chopping block." Langley glanced at Hollywood legend. "We stop it before it starts." Willis laughed bitterly. "Stop it? How? We're running for our lives, in case you forgot." Langley smirked. "That's because we've been reacting. Now it's time to go on the offensive." Hollywood legend tilted his head. "You got something in mind?" Langley stood and walked to a drawer. He pulled out a small USB drive and held it up. "This is everything I've compiled. Names, accounts, transactions, proof of what Pierce is doing." Willis's breath caught. "You mean we have evidence?" Langley nodded. We get this to the right people, and we can cut the legs out from under him before he gets his operation fully running. Tanner frowned. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? Langley's smirk widened. By going straight to the source. Hollywood Legend's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Langley tossed the USB drive onto the table. We take this to D.C. Willis stared. You want us to just walk into Washington and expose a secret kill program to the government? Langley shrugged. If we don't, who will? Tanner crossed his arms. You got a contact? Langley nodded. A senator. Someone who doesn't know he's being watched yet. If we get this to him, he can blow this whole thing wide open. Helton looked skeptical. And you trust him? Langley sighed. Not really. But I trust that if this leaks at the highest level, Pierce won't be able to operate in the shadows anymore. Hollywood Legend exhaled. It's a hell of a risk. Langley nodded. It's also our only shot. The judge's head was spinning. They had a plan. A real plan. But it came with a death sentence. If they failed, they wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Willis clenched his jaw. And what happens if Pierce finds out what we're doing? Langley gave him a knowing look. He already knows. The trailer's windows suddenly exploded. Gunfire tore through the walls. Down! Hollywood Legend roared. Willis hit the floor as bullets shredded the table. Tanner flipped over the couch for cover. Helton fired back, but they were pinned down. Langley crawled toward the USB drive. We can't let them get it. Hollywood Legend grabbed his rifle. Then let's make sure they don't. The door burst open. Figures in tactical gear stormed inside. And just like that, the war had come to them. Gunfire ripped through the trailer, turning the small space into a storm of bullets and splintered wood. Judge Willis hit the floor hard, covering his head as rounds tore through the walls, shredding everything in their path. Tanner rolled behind the overturned couch, gripping his shotgun tightly. These bastards don't waste time. Helton fired off 3 controlled shots, taking down the first man through the door. But more were coming. Hollywood Legend moved like a shadow, quick and precise. He dropped low, fired 2 shots. One hit a gunman in the chest, the other clipped another in the thigh. The wounded man staggered but didn't go down. Tanner finished the job. One pull of the shotgun trigger, and the man crumpled. Langley was crawling toward the USB drive, inches away from where it had fallen on the floor. Then, a grenade rolled through the broken window. Hollywood Legend saw it first. Move! He barked. Willis barely had time to react before Hollywood Legend grabbed him and yanked him toward the far side of the room. Boom! The trailer rocked violently, the explosion blasting a hole in the wall. Willis's ears rang painfully. His vision blurred from the dust and smoke. When he managed to sit up, he saw fire licking at the edges of the trailer. Helton pulled himself up, coughing. We can't stay here. Tanner gritted his teeth. No kidding. Outside, more figures were moving in. Black combat gear, suppressed weapons, Pierce's elite. Willis's hands shook. They weren't getting out of this. Then Hollywood Legend grabbed his collar. You want to live, Judge? He growled. Then start moving. Willis snapped out of it. Hollywood Legend pivoted, firing at the door. Another man fell. Tanner and Helton laid down cover fire. Langley snatched the USB drive off the ground. I got it, Tanner cursed. Great, now let's get the hell out of here. Hollywood Legend was already moving. He kicked open the side door, taking out a man waiting on the other side, with a brutal strike to the throat. The attacker went down, gasping for air. Move! Hollywood Legend yelled. They burst out into the night. But the fight wasn't over. The dirt lot behind the trailer was already swarming with Pierce's men. A black SUV idled near the fence. Willis's stomach dropped. Standing beside it, calm as ever, was Logan Pierce. His hands were in his pockets. He wasn't worried. He wasn't even surprised. He had expected this. Pierce's cold, sharp eyes locked onto Hollywood Legend. He smiled. Hollywood Legend, he said smoothly, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. Hollywood Legend raised his gun. You say that like I give a damn. Pierce chuckled. You should, because this ends tonight. The words sent a shiver down Willis's spine. Pierce nodded toward his men. Kill them. Everything happened at once. Gunfire lit up the night. Hollywood legend dived behind a stack of crates, firing back with lethal precision. Tanner and Helton spread out, using the darkness as cover. Willis was scrambling for anything to hide behind. Langley was still clutching the USB drive, pinned behind a rusted-out pickup truck. Pierce didn't even flinch. He stood calmly beside the SUV, watching the battle unfold. Like it was a game. Willis felt rage boiling in his gut. This man had ruined his life, had turned him into a fugitive, had burned down everything he thought he knew. And now, Pierce was watching him like he was already dead. Number not today. Willis reached for a fallen gun. His hands trembled, but his grip tightened. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't an assassin. But he wasn't going to die on his knees. Hollywood legend's voice cut through the chaos. "Tanner, get Langley out of here." Tanner didn't hesitate. He grabbed Langley and dragged him toward the SUV. Pierce watched them, smiling. "You think I don't have backups of that drive?" he called out. Langley didn't answer. Hollywood legend stood up from cover, firing 3 perfect shots. 3 men dropped instantly. Willis watched in awe. This wasn't an old cowboy actor. This was a killer. Pierce sighed. "Fine." Then, he pulled out a remote trigger. Hollywood legend's eyes locked onto it instantly. "Don't," he warned. Pierce smiled. Too late. He pressed the button. A second explosion rocked the lot. Tanner and Langley were thrown to the ground as the SUV erupted in flames. Willis felt the heat scorch his skin. Helton coughed, blood running down his arm. Hollywood legend? He didn't look shocked. He looked furious. Pierce tilted his head. "I warned you, Hollywood legend. You should have stayed buried." Hollywood legend didn't answer. Instead, he moved, fast. Before Pierce could react, Hollywood legend charged. He tackled Pierce, slamming him against the burning wreckage of the SUV. Pierce grunted, swinging a fist, but Hollywood legend caught it, twisting his arm with a sickening crack. For the first time, Pierce looked surprised. "You really think this ends with me?" Pierce hissed. Hollywood legend's voice was low. "Dangerous. Number, but it starts with you." Then, he drove his fist into Pierce's throat. Pierce gasped, choking. His knees buckled. Hollywood legend let him fall. The battlefield went quiet. The remaining gunmen, seeing their leader fall, hesitated. Then, they ran. It was over. For now. Willis collapsed against the ground, breathing hard. The world hadn't stopped spinning, but for the first time all night, he thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Hollywood legend wiped the blood from his knuckles. Then he looked at Willis. "You still think the law's gonna fix this?" Willis didn't have an answer, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure. The sun was just beginning to rise over the desert, casting a blood-red glow over the wreckage. Smoke still curled from the burned-out SUV, the scent of scorched metal and gunpowder thick in the air. Judge Willis sat on the ground, staring at the aftermath. His suit was ruined, torn, and covered in dirt. His hands still shook. He had never held a gun before tonight, never fired a shot in anger. But now, he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Logan Pierce was still alive. Barely. The man lay motionless against the burned car, gasping for breath, blood dripping from his lip. His once pristine suit was torn, his power and confidence reduced to a broken shell. Hollywood legend stood over him, expression unreadable. Helton, still clutching his wounded arm, muttered, "We should end this now." Tanner, wiping blood from his own forehead, agreed. "Leave him breathing, and he'll come back worse." Hollywood legend didn't answer right away. He just stared at Pierce. Pierce managed a weak chuckle. "You think killing me changes anything?" Willis felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Pierce coughed, smearing blood across his jaw. His voice was raspy but steady. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured. Langley, standing behind them, shifted uneasily. "He's bluffing." Pierce's smile widened. "Am I?" Helton raised his gun. "Enough of this." Pierce chuckled again, closing his eyes. "Go ahead. But the second I'm gone, the next man steps in. Blackthorn isn't a name. It's a machine. And you." He glanced at Hollywood legend. "You just gave it a reason to run faster." Willis swallowed hard. He had a horrible feeling Pierce wasn't lying. Hollywood legend finally spoke. "You're right." Pierce's smirk faltered. Hollywood legend stepped closer, lowering his voice. But you won't be around to see it? Pierce stiffened. Hollywood legend didn't raise his gun. He didn't have to. Instead, he leaned in, whispering something only Pierce could hear. The color drained from Pierce's face. For the first time, the man who had spent his life controlling the game looked afraid. Hollywood legend pulled back, watching the reaction. Then he turned and walked away. Pierce didn't move. He just sat there, his breath coming faster now. Willis didn't ask what Hollywood legend had said. Some things were better left unknown. 20 minutes later, they were on the road again. Langley sat in the back seat, clutching the USB drive, the last piece of evidence that could expose Blackthorne before it grew into something worse. Tanner drove in silence. The weight of what they had done still hung in the air. Helton checked his phone. No chatter on Pierce yet. Either he's dead or he's staying quiet. Hollywood legend just stared out the window. Willis finally spoke. So what now? Langley exhaled. We take this to D.C. We put it in the right hands. Willis laughed bitterly. And who exactly are the right hands? Because the last time I checked, people like Pierce don't rise to power alone. Someone let him build this. Langley didn't argue, because Willis was right. Tanner grinned. I think the judge is catching on. Willis sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm not built for this. Hollywood legend smirked. You are now. Willis turned to him. And what about you? What happens when this is over? Hollywood legend shrugged. Depends. If we win, maybe I finally get to disappear. Willis narrowed his eyes. And if we lose? Hollywood legend didn't answer, because they both knew. If they lost, they wouldn't be around to care. The highway stretched ahead of them, disappearing into the horizon. The fight wasn't over. The war had just begun, and this time they were bringing it to the enemy.